Pitt at SMU. It's an ACC matchup that's got a lot of meaning to it. If this was a game that you pointed to before the season started and you said, "Well, a lot of the ACC and um, a couple of contenders will be played in this one," you'd have been laughed right off of whatever chat you were on, forum, YouTube channel, whatever. But that is the case going into this ACC matchup. SMU is hosting Pitt. SMU is currently a 7.5 point favorite in this one. Kickoff will be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Over under set at a high 58.5. Mason Pitt has, as much as I hate to admit it, been the benefactor of what has been a pretty easy schedule this season. And I think we need to kind of take a look at that before we jump into really anything else in this matchup. Because I've got all the stats and we're going to look at all that stuff. And look, there's a lot of good things that have went on at Pitt, guys, and we're going to talk about that. There's some really good things offensively that have went on. Some good things defensively. But as you'll see on your screen, there in the center, first of all, is the ACC standings, and you can see where these two teams lie as far as the ACC standings go. SMU 4-0, Pitt 3-0, currently in the SEC, third and fourth, respectively. But there's one thing about Pitt's schedule that they've played and what they've got coming up that looks a lot different than SMU and what they've done this season and what they have coming up. SMU's already went through the hard part of their schedule for the most part, Mason, and took the loss there at BYU in the third week of the season. We thought, oh man, SMU. We thought maybe this team could do something. It started in the Nevada game the first week. It was like, whoa, SMU barely beat Nevada. What is going on? We talked about this team in the preseason. We had them in our preseason top 25, Mason. And we looked like idiots for about 4 weeks, right? We were like, holy crap. I hope nobody noticed that we had them in our preseason top 25. Well, here I am bringing it up, and I'm proud because this team is totally different than what it was even in week 3 of the season. Kevin Jennings stepped in for this offense at quarterback over Preston Stone, and that's made all the difference in the world. It's provided a lot of flexibility for this SMU offense, and they've put it to good use. They've certainly put it to good use. And the BYU loss, like I mentioned, we thought that was bad. Well, guess what? BYU's leading the Big 12 or tied with Iowa State in the Big 12 as far as, top team there, undefeated in the season so far. So looking at the schedule, the most impressive win here for SMU so far this season was at Louisville, 34-27, and it was a very impressive victory there. And then you look at Pitt. Kent State is who you start off with, and the fact that Pitt gave up 24 points to Kent State is actually pretty alarming, to be honest with you. Kent State is one of the worst football teams in all of America, and it has a lot to do. A lot of people have talked this season. I'm not going to get on a long rant on this, but a lot of people have talked about how the transfer portal has helped these smaller teams and helped this smaller team be able to be not so far behind as far as depth and blah, blah, blah. Well, the transfer portal has killed Kent State. So I think there's teams on either side of the argument as far as that goes. And Kent State has negatively been affected by the transfer portal and the coaches leaving that program and taking players with them and things of that sort. But 38-34 versus West Virginia, that win looks less and less impressive as the season goes on. 34-24 over North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina, whereas they might be a little bit better at this point than they were earlier in the season, they've been for the most part terrible. Lost their starting quarterback the very first week, and they've been able to score a little bit more points here lately. But you get my point. Only scored 17 against Cal. It's not been an impressive slate for Pitt. And if you look at the schedule they've got left, SMU got to go on the road to SMU, Virginia at home, Clemson at home, at Louisville, at Boston College. This is it. This is put up or shut up, gut check the rest of the way for this Pitt crew. It's been a really awesome story to start the season, but I think there's some serious speed bumps in the road coming up, and I feel like we have to pretty much preface everything that we're going to say as far as statistically with that. But let's talk about this SMU offense for a second. And I was trying to just beat you to the punch, Mason, because I knew you were going to gut punch my Pitt Panthers. And I kid around. It's been kind of a running joke around here. I bet on Pitt a few times this season, and they won me some money, and so I've been really excited about what Pitt has been able to do, and I know Pitt fans, you've been excited about it as well. No matter what happens at this point, almost no matter what happens at this point, it's a good season for Pitt. Um, Offensively for SMU, let's transition over to SMU. Like I said, this group has been really good through the air for the most part, and they've been, whereas they haven't been really efficient rushing the football. They've been able to get some yards on the ground, and that, like I said, had a lot to do with Kevin Jennings coming in at quarterback. He's really fleet of foot. The guy is super mobile, can get you the first down whenever you need it. And I think that helps this offense a ton, being able to convert on third downs, keep ahead of the sticks. And this team has done a pretty good job of that. The inspiration of this team is very clear. This is a team that wants to be known as a big team in the ACC, a powerhouse in college football. And I don't know that they're a powerhouse at this point, but nobody wants it worse than SMU. We've talked about it on this channel. This SMU club has deferred a bunch millions and millions and millions of dollars to be able to join the ACC this season. And in return, they're having a really good season. And Rhett Lashley, where it started a little rocky, things have looked a lot better here of late. What do you think about this offense going against this Pitt defense? What are your thoughts, kind of overall, Mason? We'll just kind of free for all it here, but let's start with that SMU offense, and then you just kind of go wherever you want to go with it. But what are your thoughts this season with that group? It was a rough week last week, 6 turnovers in that game last week. Do you think the SMU offense is going to be able to bounce back? You hate not to have momentum going into this one, but they were still able to win the football game. And if you're going to learn lessons, you'd like to learn them while winning the football game if possible. What are your thoughts on this team and the offense so far this season?
Well, I think you got to put a lot of trust in Jennings at this point. Hasn't played phenomenal. Hasn't been just some stellar quarterback. He's not on any Heisman list or anything like that. But he's been very serviceable, considering he was the backup going into the season. Really, I've been really impressed with him and what he's been able to do with his legs in particular. But he just adds a different dynamic to this offense. And he's a big reason why they've been so successful in the running game. You see they're 24th in the country in rushing yards per game, averaging over 200 yards per game. That plays right into Pitt's hand on defense, where you see that they're top 10 in the country in rushing yards per game allowed. I also don't think that Pitt has really faced a running quarterback to the caliber of Jennings. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. Does Jennings hurt Pitt with his legs? I think he's good at passing the football, but there's no R.J. Maryland to throw to anymore. Lashley announced today that Maryland is out for the season with a knee injury, and
Mm,
he was a huge piece of this offense, in particular in the passing game. That's a guy who is listed as a tight end, but has been playing more and more like a wide receiver, and has really been the safety valve for this offense. So not having him is huge, but we've already seen this SMU offense pivot once at quarterback and put in the backup in Jennings and have more success. I doubt that you're going to find someone just as physically imposing as Maryland is or was for this SMU offense, but I think knowing going into this football game that you're going to be without him for the rest of the season helps them ramp up and get prepared for this Pitt defense that has really shown an ability to turn the ball over or or get takeaways, I should say, on the defensive side of the football, and in particular last week against Syracuse, where they had five interceptions in that football game. I thought that was really phenomenal, a phenomenal outing by the Pitt defense. So to me, for SMU in this offense, you gotta make sure you limit those turnovers. You might give up one or two, and on the flip side, I mean the SMU offense gave up 6 last week, so you're really looking at two tails or two different sides of the spectrum here in what these offenses did or what these teams did last week in the turnover game. But I think that Lashley will get that rectified and get that figured out. And I honestly think that SMU is going to have some success in the run game against Pitt this week. Like I said, they haven't faced a rushing team quite like SMU's. I know that Hampton is really good for North Carolina, but overall, North Carolina's offense was or is really relying on Hampton. I think that SMU has a little bit more balance to them offensively, and they should be able to run the football, which is going to open up some things in the pass game for them. And I give the advantage here to SMU's offense over Pitt's defense, as good as Pitt's defense has played, so far this season.
Let's talk a little bit about that Pitt offense going against this SMU defense. This will be the matchup I think that kind of determines this football game. And Eli Holstein has had a really, really good season. I mean, there's really no getting around that. 64.2% completion, 1,805 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Has been sacked 14 times this season, Mason. And if you look at SMU, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a strength of this team to get after the quarterback, but I would, better than average, a little bit better than average with 17 sacks so far this year. Um, it'll be interesting to see how this SMU defense matches up with this Pitt offense, right? Mumfield, the leading receiver, 27 receptions, 473 yards, 3 touchdowns. But Pitt has done a pretty good job at spreading the football around. You've got 3 different guys with 24 or more receptions, right? So, done a pretty decent job as far as moving the football around, getting into different guys' hands. And that's been the weakness for this SMU defense, Mason. Not been great at pass defense this season. You can see it on your screen. It's certainly the outlier. 100th in the country at pass yards per game allowed, 238.6. And that's where I believe that this line comes from as far as the over under goes, being set relatively high on this football game. Um, that's one of the biggest questions in this game. Um, how beyond the Pitt defense being able to kind of disrupt the passing game of SMU, vice versa. What is SMU going to be able to do to be able to disrupt what Pitt has had going on? Pitt has been the benefactor last week anyway of some really short fields, but even whenever they got a short field, they hit an explosive play almost immediately. And that really it hasn't been a strength of this team rushing the ball. They haven't been explosive rushing the ball really at all, but they have been through the air. 35th in the country of pass plays of 20 plus yards, of 29 this season for the Pitt offense. That's really, really solid and matches up well against what I said, a soft secondary. And that's really the only way I can put it for SMU. SMU's got to figure out a way to disrupt this Pitt offense. Um, uh, Rush yards per game, Pitt hasn't been setting the world on fire there, but they've been extremely efficient running the football at 5.49 yards per carry this season. And like I said, we have to wait, who this team has played. And I don't know the exact metric on strength of schedule, but it's not been an extremely strong, schedule for Pitt. So you got to take some of these numbers with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong, but um, SMU, no doubt about it, has to be able to stop the run on first down with this Pitt offense. And then they got to look for those explosive plays. And I think that'll be the recipe here. You got to get Pitt behind the sticks. Um, Easier said than done. I think this SMU defense hasn't been the most impressive to me this season, Mason.
Yeah, really good against the run, but that kind of kind of plays into Pitt's hand there a little bit, where they've been much better in the passing game. I really
Yeah.
like Eli Holstein. I think he's played extremely well. His status is I guess a little bit up in the air for this game. Pat Narduzzi said after the game last week that he would be fine moving forward. He was, jumping around with the team after the win, and it seemed like he was healthy. And then and maybe this is just gamesmanship by Narduzzi, but now he's saying that he's day to day he'll be a game time decision. I'd be pretty surprised if we don't see Holstein in this game, but really like what I've seen out of him. I mean, he's made some extremely good throws, and been able to move the sticks whenever they need him to. It looks really easy for him against the ACC so far this year. So to me, I give the advantage to Pitt's offense versus this SMU defense, in particular in the passing game. I do think that if they find some success in the passing game, they could make this a long day for the SMU defense. But that SMU defense up front has been really good against some pretty decent running games, or running teams, I should say. So to me, if you're making Pitt one dimensional, if they're not able to run the football, I think that bodes well for the SMU defense. Obviously, we'll have to see how that plays out because, like you said, I mean, Pitt, when they do need to run the football, they have been pretty efficient. But it's you're playing into the strength, I guess, of SMU's defense. So, not sure that that's necessarily going to be the game plan. Maybe Pitt sort of passes to set up the run in this football game a little bit more. But definitely giving the edge here to Pitt's offense, in particular that passing attack with Eli Holstein.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's make our predictions on this football game, and then I just want to kind of talk about SMU here for a second, and what we think their chances are here as the ACC schedules kind of start to wind down to an end. I mean, here we are knocking on the door of November, so it's time to look at schedules and figure out who's going to be able to push their way through this thing. So, with that being said, what what's your prediction here, Mason? I got to be honest with you. I think SMU is going to be able to run away with this one. I think that they can win this game by 10 or 13 points. I think is a possibility. Um, now, I don't think Pitt is undefeated, and they're undefeated for a reason. Pitt is not a bad football team in any sense. But like we said, they're not battle tested, man, and they're going to walk into a situation where SMU wants it, and they want it really, really bad. So we'll see. Is Pitt content, resting on their laurels? I mean, what's a one loss if you're already undefeated in your Pitt, right? But I just I think things point to a high scoring football game in this one. Just like the over under is set. I'm not so sure it's going to get all the way up to 58 and a half. I'm thinking more around the 55 region. So under might be something that I'm going to consider come our Thursday betting show. And if you're a college football betting fan, we hope that you'll come join us on Thursday evenings. Actually, this week it'll be on Wednesday evening due to Halloween. So tomorrow evening we'll be talking lines and things like that. So come and join us. But that'd be a play that I would consider. And SMU minus 7.5 is a play that I would consider. But I certainly think that SMU has got the edge, at least enough to win this football game, certainly. So give me SMU to win this thing. And I think they keep marching towards the ultimate goal of making it to Charlotte for the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that this game is played at home for SMU. I think that does add to their ability to cover here in this football game. Look, this is the first top 25 matchup that Pitt has had all season, and they've had some really close games. Now, Pitt in week 10 is a different football team than Pitt in week 6. I will, give you that. I think that they're playing sort of their best football right now, coming off of a big win against Syracuse. A lot of turnovers in that game. A lot of things went their way. I think that SMU is going to be able to protect the football much better than they did against Duke. And I think that they win this football game by about 10 or 13 points. as far as the over/under goes, I could see this being a little bit of a shootout. I'm probably going to stay away from that line, but I like SMU at -7.5. I'm not scared of that hook there on the end. I think that SMU is going to be able to win this one by double digits.
And just real quick before we close this video out, because we gotta. I mean, SMU is in contention here, so and Pitt is too, folks. So I mean, this we already kind of talked about Pitt and what they've got left. I mean, pretty tough schedule that Pitt's got left there. You can see it at the left of your screen. I already mentioned some of those football games, and I just don't think there's a chance in hell that Pitt's able to run that gauntlet. And that gauntlet starts this week at SMU, which I just predicted them to lose that game. So with them losing that football game, they've got to go. They got to host Virginia, host Clemson, right, and no bye weeks there. At Louisville, and then at Boston College, and no bye weeks between now and the rest of the season, right? So 11, 2, 9, 16, 23, 30th, those are all dates in November. No bye weeks. So really, really tough situation there for Pitt. SMU, on the other hand, if they win this football game, Boston College is a formidable opponent. So I'm not going to say that that's just like guaranteed or anything, but SMU is definitely going to be favored in that game. Going to have to you'll be hosted in Boston College, so that certainly helps. At Virginia, I don't, it might be a little bit of a high scoring football game there, but I like SMU. And then Cal, it'll be interesting to see how Cal's defense matches up with SMU's offense, but I just don't think Cal has got the firepower to be able to hang with SMU. So things look really good for SMU if they can win this thing out, man. And meanwhile, you've got Clemson, who's got some, they've got a big matchup this week, right? And got a chance that there's a chance they could lose this week to Louisville. And then Miami has flirted with disaster all year. So I think that Miami's going to Charlotte, but I'm not ready to say that I'm just giving this thing to Clemson. SMU's got a shot to make it to Charlotte here, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at their remaining schedule, they've really got a chance to go undefeated in the ACC, which nobody really expected in year one for the Mustangs here. Only loss being to BYU. That looks like a really quality loss at this point, but BYU being a Big 12 team doesn't affect their chances in the ACC championship. Anxious to see how it all plays out. Really, I guess my biggest concern would be Miami, but when you look at Miami's schedule, they've got a real opportunity, probably a better opportunity than SMU does to win out the remainder of their regular season games. So you could be looking at the end of the year with 3 undefeated ACC teams in conference play. How does that play out? Who's going to be, what's the tiebreaker? All 3 of those teams will obviously not have played head to head. So how does that all shake out? I would assume that it would be Clemson versus Miami if that were the case, but I'm not even sure what the tiebreaker is for the ACC right now. But I like SMU's chances to win out. For Pitt, on the other hand, I think Pitt is looking at 1 or 2 wins in the last 5 weeks of their schedule here, and could potentially go 1-4 down the stretch here. I think it really just does get that hard for them. Louisville's not an easy team by any stretch. I would favor Louisville in that matchup. And then I think you win one of the 2 between Virginia and Boston College and end up with 4 losses to end the season for Pitt.
Yeah, I think you got to concentrate on that Virginia and that Boston College game. I mean, obviously, as a team, you concentrate on all of them, but if you can somehow win those 2 football games, that's a 9-3 season, and that is just outstanding for Narduzzi and Pitt, no doubt about it. And it's been a great run for this team so far this season, winning a lot of close games, and sometimes that is a good sign of good coaching, Mason. And it's been a great run for Pitt, and they're going to have an opportunity to prove it to the world this weekend in Dallas as they will face off against SMU.